The Sargo Class submarine USS Seawolf was one of America's most active submarines in the early war in the Pacific. The experiences of the men aboard the Seawolf are representative of the sacrifice, the heroism, and the terror of the silent service. For operational reasons, the service of the Seawolf was kept a secret during the Second World War, but was later related to two reporters by her chief radioman and published as a book in 1945. This story has 80 heroes and one heroine, begins an official U.S. Navy history of the Sargo Class submarine USS Seawolf. The heroes are the officers and men of an American submarine. The heroine is the ship herself. The Sargo Class was a series of 10 submarines constructed between 1937 and 1939. The class faced a disaster early on, one that illustrated the risks of the submarine service. USS Seawolf was lost during dive testing in May 1939, an accident in which 26 sailors died. The loss of Seawolf was not lost on newly promoted radioman first class Joseph Melvin Eckberg when he went to see the new submarine to which he had been assigned at Portsmouth Naval Yard in 1939. As recorded in the 1945 book USS Seawolf, Submarine Raider of the Pacific. Let's take the Wolf the first time I saw her. She wasn't any beauty then. They were just completing her at Portsmouth, New Hampshire. She was covered with black scaffolding. Workmen were climbing all over her sides, and I felt low. You see, they were building the Wolf at Flatiron Pier, and in the dye dock, less than 300 yards away, they'd brought in the ill-fated Seawolf. For 10 bad minutes before I set eyes on the Wolf, I watched them take the dead from the Seawolf. I saw them carrying off the bodies of men I knew, lifeless bodies hidden under gray tarpaulins, carrying them over the gangplank on stretchers. And at the same time I heard the pneumatic hammers working on the hull of the Wolf. Eckberg, already a veteran who'd spent a dozen years in the submarine service, had enlisted at age 18. He explained, "When my brother Paul, quartermaster first class on a submarine, felt my biceps, punched me in the shoulder and said, 'Kid, why don't you come into this outfit? We could use you.'" As he gazed upon his new vessel, when I finally got away from there and stood in front of the Wolf, I did my best to keep the Seawolf out of my mind. Yard workmen were laying the Wolf's teakwood decking. Riveters were assembling her periscope shears. Painters were daubing a thick black coat of paint on her sides, which swelled outward so gracefully at the waterline. Her heavy bronze bell was being rigged. Under the scaffolding I could make out her clean, trim lines. She was pretty. He was even more impressed when he got on board. "I thought I knew submarines," he remarked. "In 12 years I've seen a lot of submarines, but the Wolf topped them all. More than 308 feet long, weighing 1,480 tons, built to make over 20 knots surface speed, air-conditioned and equipped with every modern device. She combined the best we knew in submarine construction." As to the men the Navy history called 80 heroes, Eckberg knew them firsthand. The crew of the Wolf began to gather now, picked submarine men from all over the world, from San Diego and Mare Island, China and New London, Panama and Seattle. Burly men, ham-fisted and barrel-chested. Little wiry men who looked as though they'd jump at a noise, but turned out to be made of cold-drawn steel. Soft-looking men who could bake a cake or strangle a man. Psalm singers and book lovers, swaggering lady killers and men with ice water in their veins. Jew and Gentile, Italian, Swede, Dane, German, Scotch, Irish, Pole. Americans who were there to take over the Wolf with me and make her the great sea raider she was. One of the greatest of all time. These are submarine men. The Wolf would prove herself to be more than pretty, and her submarine men would prove themselves as well. The U.S. Navy history writes more than 300 feet long, with 8 torpedo tubes and a surface speed of better than 20 knots. She was commissioned 1 December 1939, and since that day, she led an exciting and secret life. Eckberg would see much of that secret life. Watching, thinking about it all, I couldn't know then what lay before us. Cavite and the stench of Japanese dead in the harbor at Manila, the looting of the Philippines, terror and split-second escapes from death in the shallow waters of the Lombok Straits, day and night raids on Japanese shipping from Christmas Island to Corregidor, depth charges and depth charges and depth charges, many missions and 40,000 miles under the Pacific, and weeks on end without seeing the sun. Well, nobody could have dreamed anything like that then. It was August 1939, and the newspapers that day were full of the threat of war. USS Seawolf would see that war firsthand. After the requisite shakedown and training, Seawolf was assigned to the Pacific Fleet, and when war came, she was there. On December 8, 1941, Eckberg was in Manila, where Seawolf was waiting its turn to receive a scheduled overhaul at Cavite Naval Base, when he first heard the news of the attack on Pearl Harbor from a passing boy. He recalled his shock, saying to the boy, "You crazy?" He hurried to his boat, where its commander, Lieutenant Frederick B. Warder, a commander so aggressive that he would earn the nickname Fearless Freddy, growled at Eckberg, "Come on, you guys! There's a war on! Get moving!" The naval history writes, December 7, 1941, found the Seawolf at Manila on routine patrol. Immediately the word was flashed, and on 8 December, the SS-197 began her first war patrol of World War II. Warder told the crew, "Needless to say, you all know we're not playing anymore. We're out after them now. Let's get 'em." The Navy history notes a naval tradition. Coins of all denominations flashed over the sides and into the water, in keeping with one of the many traditions which are so deeply rooted and have such a part in the submarine service. Their luck assured, the men of the Seawolf took her down and went hunting. On December 14th, Seawolf made her first attack of the war on the Japanese seaplane tender Sanyu Maru. The results were inconclusive, but it seems likely that the attack was foiled by the notorious unreliability of U.S. torpedoes early in the war. The Seawolf also underwent her first depth charge attack, which Eckberg describes. The exploding charges were something special to hear. They sounded as though a giant smashed together boulders as large as houses under the water with pulverizing force. Shortly after, Seawolf was able to surface at night to recharge her batteries and received messages. Eckberg writes, "We learned that we were the first submarine to come out of the Philippines, and that our attack on the seaplane tender had been the first U.S. submarine attack of World War II. Seawolf saw no targets on their second patrol and provided resupply to Corregidor on its third. Eckberg tells about life on the submarine, including a makeshift Christmas tree made of wooden dowels and covered with tinsel made from gum wrappers, illustrating what life was like on patrol. One crewman remarked, "By God, it is Christmas Eve, come to think of it," and another said, "Sure wish I was home tonight." In another telling moment, after the second patrol, while at Cavite, he saw a friend from the service, Bull Kaiser, radioman on USS Swordfish, which was there on a similar mission. "I'd gotten drunk with him in different parts of the world more times than I could remember," Eckberg recalled. "We thumped each other on the back and shook hands and talked over things. By this time we had to get back to our boats, and we shook hands. I never saw him again." Seawolf had earned her reputation on her fourth patrol. The naval history writes, during the patrol from 15 February to 7 April 1942, the Seawolf covered the Surabaya and Java Sea areas, the southern approaches to Sunda Strait, the Australian Sunda traffic lanes, and the waters surrounding Christmas Island. The history notes that Seawolf's skipper later reported that during this sortie, the SS-197 was in a number of tight spots and suffered a number of mechanical casualties. Eckberg describes one desperate moment. "We were in a hell of a spot. We were trapped, we were lost, and above us prowled Japanese warships loaded with depth charges. Trapped among coral reefs that could easily sink the boat, Warder made a dangerous decision to surface so that he could see." Eckberg writes, "For the first time in my life, I think I knew absolute craven fear. Here it was bright daylight, and Captain Warder was bringing us up in the middle of the Japanese task force that could blow us to bits with a single salvo. But the expected attack didn't come. As we surfaced, a tropical squall had struck us, as though in the Wolf's extremity someone had cast a huge gray blanket over us, shielding us from the Japanese. An act of God," Captain Warder called it later. But Seawolf was predator more than prey. The Navy history writes, contact with the enemy occurred on 19 February, 25 February, 31 March, and 1 April. One Japanese transport, target for 2 of Seawolf's torpedoes on 19 February, was observed with the starboard list and down by the stern, escorted by 4 Japanese destroyers. Another enemy transport, at anchor at the time, was attacked by the Seawolf with unknown results. Other Japanese ships attacked included one large transport and destroyer on 25 February, one enemy light cruiser, which subsequently retaliated with a depth charge attack, one Nitori-type cruiser and one Jintao-type cruiser, both on 1 April. On February 25th, 2 destroyers harried the Seawolf in a 4-hour attack. Many times destroyers ran over the submarine without dropping charges, being ignorant of their immediate proximity. After the harrowing battle, the Navy history writes, Seawolf received credit for the sinking of a transport and damaging a freighter, 3 light cruisers, and 2 transports. John Domolgoski writes on Warfare History Network, the fact that a larger score eluded Fred Warder and his men off Christmas Island was not due to a lack of daring leadership and hard work. Perhaps a victim of faulty torpedoes, a chronic problem during the early years of the war. Eckberg lodged a message from command. A wonderful cruise. Your accomplishments rank among the greatest of all times. Congratulations. For the patrol, Fearless Freddy was awarded the Navy Cross, and the men of Seawolf received their first Navy unit commendation. The citation reads, "She struck daringly to sink or damage thousands of tons of shipping, including Japanese cruisers and transports, a freighter and a destroyer, returning persistently to the attack despite exceptionally severe depth charging, which started numerous leaks, broke her instruments, and put vital machinery out of action." Seawolf continued her aggressive action. After her 7th patrol, Seawolf returned to San Francisco for overhaul. There both Eckberg and Warder left the boat. Eckberg recalled, "When it came time for me to open my locker and take my personal belongings on shore, I knew that I was saying goodbye to the Seawolf. It had been more than just a steel structure to me. I'd lived and died 1,000 times on that ship. Men whom I admired more than any others I know had lived and worked with me on this ship. I knew every bulkhead, every door. She held no secrets from me. I walked through her before I took off my stuff, letting my mind wander over all the Wolf had done. The evacuations of men and materiel, the high command, the aviators, ammunition, depth charges, Christmas Island, 1,000 places, 1,000 thrills." For his service aboard Seawolf, Eckberg was awarded the Silver Star. Warder was awarded his 2nd Navy Cross and was reassigned to the staff of the commander of Pacific submarines and later commanded the Navy Submarine School. The crew gave him an engraved watch, and he gave a short speech saying, "Here, I believe, is the best submarine crew ever gathered together." Eckberg wrote, "He walked over the gangplank to the dock and was gone. He had brought his ship and his men safely home." But the story of Seawolf was not finished. She would complete more war patrols, earning her 2nd Naval Unit Commendation, the first U.S. submarine to do so. The citation reads, "Persistent and daring, the USS Seawolf penetrated the mouths of enemy harbors in bold pursuit of hostile shipping. Her outstanding performance in combat attests the skill and superb teamwork of her courageous officers and men, and reflect the highest credit upon her service." She would be credited with sinking over 71,000 tons of enemy shipping, and played an instrumental role in addressing the problems with U.S. torpedo designs. On September 21st, 1944, Seawolf left Brisbane, Australia, on her 15th War Patrol, under the command of Lieutenant Commander A.L. Bontier. She had aboard 17 soldiers and 10 tons of Army supplies that were to be inserted in the Philippines. On October 3rd, at 5 minutes before 8 in the morning, Seawolf exchanged recognition signals with the submarine SS Narwhal. It was the last communication from Seawolf. She was never heard from again. On December 28, 1944, the Navy Department's Office of Public Information announced in Communique number 564, "The submarine USS Seawolf is overdue from patrol and presumed lost. Next of kin of casualties have been informed."
This last chapter for the storied vessel was doubly a tragedy, as the Navy later determined that the Seawolf was most likely the victim of friendly fire. It seems a Japanese submarine had attacked a U.S. convoy seeking the destroyer escort USS Shelton, and in the aftermath, the Seawolf was confused for the enemy vessel. USS Seawolf was the only United States submarine to be lost to Allied fire in the Pacific theater. At the time that her loss was announced, the record of USS Seawolf, whom Eckberg described as the best damn submarine in the United States Navy, was still a secret, but the United Press International noted that while the Navy did not release the war record of the Seawolf, it obviously had a distinguished career. USS Seawolf is today memorialized at Seawolf Park on Pelican Island, Texas. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of The History Guy, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe and share The History Guy with your friends. And if you also believe that history deserves to be remembered, then you can support The History Guy as a member on YouTube, a supporter on our community at Locals, or as a patron on Patreon. You can also check out our great merchandise shop or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo.